So it is 12 o'clock. So we're going to get started. Oh, thanks, Kim. I appreciate that. It's helpful just so I know what kinds of information is most useful for people. And if anyone else comes, we'll catch them up as they go. So my name is Gina Wilson, and this this was a lot of my doctoral work. This was from my dissertation, but it really stems from my work at an early middle college. So I will start with a short introduction. I want to spend a lot of time on my participants' stories, and then what we can do as educators to address their experiences so that they have the same outcomes as other students. I took a very circuitous route to education. I knew education as a meritocracy didn't sit right when I was a teenager, but I didn't understand why for a long time. And math is my first love, but I got convinced I needed to be an engineer. And then I ended up back in education, working at an urban school and then a private independent college prep school, and then at the early middle college for the bulk of my career. And I would say somewhere in the early middle college and achieving national board in 2014 is where I started to really understand what was going on in systems and that outcomes weren't the same for people. And then 2016 is momentous in our county. I'm in southeastern Michigan. That was 17 deaths of teens by suicide that year, in addition to the national election and being on a college campus with students of underrepresented and marginalized populations. Between the mental health concerns and the election and political climate, it was a really intense year in terms of what people were realizing and for my own practice as an educator. So before I share all of my participant stories, and I also realized I never actually introduced the title of this presentation because I was so excited to get going and talk about it. This is using Black girl student voice to break down barriers to post-secondary education. The Early College Alliance at Eastern Michigan University is a public early middle college. It is a countywide consortium. And some of this is context for what my students were experiencing and what our students were experiencing, but also some of it is I'm providing it so that you can consider how this matches and aligns or doesn't align with what your students are experiencing. So there's Michigan's pretty locally controlled in terms of education. So there's 9 districts in Washtenaw County. The partnership started with just 4, but as the partnership increased, all of the districts eventually joined the consortium that runs the early middle college. The other partners are the Intermediate School District and Eastern Michigan University, which is a 4-year university. There, interestingly enough, is an early middle college 5 minutes away on a community college campus. That one was started first, and then ECA came along several years later. So ECA is not a charter school. It is a full consortium where students maintain membership in their local educational association. Diplomas are earned through their enrolling district through an agreement with the consortium. And the superintendents of the districts in the county are the Joint Steering Committee, which is essentially the school board for the consortium. And if you are in an adjacent county, then you can use school of choice under Michigan law to any district in Washtenaw County that's accepting school of choice students if you want to attend ECA. So ECA initially started as a 10th and 11th grade program, and then later added the 9th grade academy. So 9th grade students are not eligible for college classes. That eligibility for college classes comes in the 2nd semester of your 10th grade year, or your 2nd semester after enrolling. So if you come as an 11th grader, it'd be 2nd semester of your 11th grade year. It's fully on campus at the university. The only time students would return to their original or their home districts was to do extracurriculars or athletics. And as was talked about in the research panel earlier this morning, as an early middle college, there is an intense focus on academic and soft skill readiness. Relationships are another key part. You're assigned an advisor when you enter the program. That advisor stays with you through your transition through the program into college classes and then to graduation. And there is support for transitioning IEPs into 504 plans and then 504 plans into the university system if you are a student that utilizes 504 plans and IEPs. And the other thing is this is definitely a self-selected program. So yes, even though people are supported with 504s and IEPs, it's a self-selection of students who say that post-secondary is important to me because of the proximity of the other school on the community college campus. This draws people who are focused on four-year degrees, although quite a few students do report that they don't know what they want to do. They're coming because they don't like their other options. And so it's got that dual pull of enrollment. And I should say that I left the school almost 2 years ago, and I now work for a nonprofit that supports teachers. But I was there for 16 years before I left. And if you have questions, please interrupt or ask in the chat. I am not at all bothered by that. It's the teacher in me. So this work came about because as I was math department chair for the majority of my time there, and really trying to focus on strengthening success in the college classes, the realization hit me that one, most of the lower level ECA classes, or the developmentally equivalent classes below high school grade level, were populated by Black girls. Oops. And that in that realization, that means that that population of students is not achieving or being given access to the same outcomes as every other student, because they are by default then going to earn fewer college credits. If you take longer to transition into college math, or if you have to repeat college math classes, which was another realization I had, you are not given the same chance to earn as many credits. So you're not able to max out your 60 credits at the university level. And ECA's high school graduation requirement is either Math 104 or Math 110. Math 110 is the quantitative reasoning general education requirement for non-STEM majors at Eastern Michigan University. And Math 104 is fairly equivalent to a high school Algebra 2 class. It's also the first 100 level class for STEM majors. And placement at the time of this study for EMU math classes was all done through a math placement exam, the AccuPlacer, regardless of what you had on your transcript. And ECA students were no different in that respect. They had to go through the same process as an entering freshman. Do you think Black girls perform less due to peer pressure? I actually found the opposite with the ones that I talked to, in the sense that they were incredibly persistent and conscious of the fact that they were struggling in areas that other students were not, and that they were not going to let that get in the way of their degree attainment. And so I did not have anybody say to me that it was uncool to be smart in math. In fact, I had many that were frustrated and angry that they felt they were not smart. And one brought up the pressure of smart in society being defined as being able to be smart in math. Like if you're smart in English, nobody cares. But as soon as you're smart in math, then all of a sudden society considers you to be smart. Exactly, I know. And that particular person was a brilliant theater arts person and director, and could build sets, could direct plays, could create characters, and she still felt she was not smart because she struggled so much in school-based math. And so I was as a department chair, trying to figure out how to support Black girls, and then I decided I was going to earn my doctorate, and this became my work in an effort to better support them. There's a lot more history in the whole 2016 issues going on in the county and the country, but I want to to talk about what I found. So I entered with 4 research questions. This was all self-identified as Black girls. I ended up interviewing 6 with a range of experiences, and I'll show you in just a sec. So how do they experience their early middle college math classes? How do they experience their college math classes? How do they view mathematics in relation to their goals of completing bachelor's degrees? And then what changes could the early middle college make to better support girls obtaining all the benefits of attending an early middle college, namely the maximum amount of credits usable towards their degree? So the big thing about this chart, these are my 6 participants. This was a qualitative study. I used phenomenology because I wanted to center their voices and try to impose as little as possible of my own beliefs on top of it. So the big thing about the participants is they fell into 2 groups: people who self-identified as good at math or who had been kind of labeled that way by the school system, and people who identified as bad. I was evenly split, 3 of each, over a range of graduation dates. And you can see that the 3 on the top who self-identify as good at math ended up taking more advanced math classes. I can say Angel actually will have gone farther by the time when she finished high school. She was the only one still enrolled in high school. The 3 that self-identified as bad at math ended up taking, 2 of them took the general education quantitative analysis class. 1 was determined that she was going to do higher math than that, and so she went through college algebra. But you can also see the amount of people who had to repeat classes and didn't, and who took developmental math. So the 3 that identified themselves as bad ended up in developmental math for ECA classes and EMU classes, high school and college, and repeated classes, whereas only 1 person in the top group had to repeat a class, and that was an ECA class, a high school class, not a college class. The key thing on this slide is that 1 person did receive services through a 504 plan, and that everybody either finished high school or intended to finish. Angel was still in progress at the time of this study. 5 of the 6 finished or would finish through ECA. Tina is the only person who left ECA to graduate elsewhere, but then returned to college after a gap to earn her bachelor's degree. So those are the key things off of that in terms of who everybody is. This is a summary of what I found, and then I have more detailed findings and in their words and their experiences. So the Black girls that were enrolled in ECA are keenly aware that their mathematical experiences occur in white spaces designed to exclude them. Being seen or heard in that environment requires overcoming a variety of obstacles, including self-blame, isolation, and emotional and academic impacts of being labeled good or bad at math by the education system, while carefully monitoring their behaviors and words so as not to meet others' expectations of the stereotypical Black females. And that was true regardless of whether or not you self-identified as good or bad at math. So after I did my interviews and asked them those questions and got a lot of their experiences, 4 main themes came through. And each theme has several sub-themes. So being Black and female in mathematical spaces is about belonging and the connections they make. The impacts of mathematics on their lives, both in school and out of school. The effect of persistence, that's a lot of emotional effects of being persistent and what it costs them, and then how they learn math. And the one quote I kept coming back to was when I was interviewing Vanna, and she was just like, hey, it's not just me, but why is this a problem? Relief that it wasn't just her, but very much frustration in the sense that why are we still struggling with this? So I'm going to run through the themes, and I have quotes in boxes from the students. Being Black and female in mathematical spaces entails a lot of discouragement and expectations of failure from both peers and adults. And the second guessing of their own ability to succeed. So Anna was continually feeling like she was intimidating. I feel like I have to try to not be that stereotypical Black female. And so when I answer questions, they have to be right or sound a type of way. And that was in high school classes and through her calculus sequence at the university. The expectation of others that, oh, I'm Black, so I must be dumb, and I'm a woman, so I must be dumb. And therefore, I'm just not expected to perform well on the test. And that was not other Black girls. That this goes back to the question that was in the chat. This was not other Black girls, but this was teachers, mainly white peers, and the teachers were at both. I don't want to say in the high school level, but some of the students said that came through, but then also in the college level. Tina is the one who left ECA and finished high school and came back, and she said that Black girls are just going to continue to struggle because they're more susceptible to that class. Yes, and that kills me that people are still feeling this. That was probably the most devastating thing to me, was when I went through all of their work and realized that they were struggling with this so much that it was that was a hard week when I did that. And Angel's comment about walking into spaces mentally and physically exhausting, constantly searching. And I can hear her saying this is like, oh, am I the only one? Oh, okay, I am. I still have to power through. I still have to survive this because this is something I want to do. So even knowing how hard it's going to be, still going through all of the work to get where they wanted to be. When they talked about their transition from the early middle college into the university, it was stressful, anxiety, and nerve-wracking, which was a shock to everybody at the early middle college because of all of the work that we had done to try to ease the transition. And then the amount of stress and anxiety and both physical and mental exhaustion that came through. Chandler was shocked and confused, and her words were she was let loose from the really tightly controlled environment to the less controlled environment. And this is even with the supports of an advisor who helps you set up your classes, and the credentialing system of, you know, when your high school, early middle college teachers feel that you're ready to move on. All of this, the seminars and the wraparound meetings and supports that were provided, she still felt like she wasn't prepared for it. There was a lot of disconnection from the older students, or feeling that they would be disconnected and being scared of not knowing how to act. And part of that is being 15, 16 on a college campus. And part of that is an additional layer of the intersection of Black and female identities. And then even though Anna met with her advisor to create a schedule, and even though she trusted her advisor, that meeting did not ease her fears, which is a key indicator that needs are not being addressed. If the system that's been put in place is not meeting their needs and they are able to articulate that. In terms of relationships with instructors, the advisor was not Black or brown. That I know for sure. There was, I'm thinking of the makeup at the time that she was in the school. There was one math teacher of color, not Black, but teacher of color. There was one science teacher of color, not Black. And there was the office manager was a Black female who was a huge support for Black females in the school. But it hurt again that it was not an instructor, just that it was that the girls even articulated this, that like they need to see people in yes, it was great that she was in an academic space at the school, but she wasn't in the same academic space as an instructor. So in terms of creating relationships with instructors, it was absolutely critical for their academic success and their well-being. When instructors were accessible, both in the early middle college and the university, they all saw their exam scores increase, their confidence increased, and they were able to utilize the repeated office hours, which is a key component of the soft skills curriculum in the early middle college. If the instructors were inaccessible, either in the early middle college or the university, the amount of worrying went up considerably, and the amount that they were able to articulate how it impacted their mental health negatively, because they were expending all of this additional energy trying to get help and do what they were taught to do in the middle college. So in the classroom, there was more talk about the strong need to feel belonging, and the normalization of different solution methods, and the fact that struggle is expected and okay, and that you need to make connections between the solution pathways. The one thing that really stuck out to me here is that one of the early middle college math teachers, thinking that they were being incredibly supportive and problem solving, saying, I know you're smart enough, you're a good math student, you can figure it out. And the student feeling like that was a complete slap in the face, because she was already feeling anxious about the material and not about fitting in and being the only Black female. And instead of being supportive, that comment, which was from a white female teacher, had the exact opposite effect. Early middle college students, ECA students, provided a huge amount of comfort during the transition. They were so excited to find out that there was another ECA student in their class, and sadly, sometimes that didn't happen until 5 or 6 weeks into the semester, which was too late. Not too late, but a lot of damage had already been done. And then they were all very surprised that their concerns about interacting with the older EMU students did not really materialize. They were often met with curiosity when it came out that they were high school students. And in the girls that identified as being good at math in the calculus and trigonometry and linear algebra classes said that study groups created a huge community. The girls that were in the developmental classes, or that self-identified as bad and were in the general education classes, did not identify study groups at all as a support. And that was more one-on-one work with instructors. And then the representation was a huge concern and point of frustration for them. Nobody had a Black math instructor, male or female. At the university level, the Black instructors they had were almost all in the culturally centered classes, like the Africology department. Even at the college level, they were able to articulate that there were more Black students in developmental classes, and they felt isolated in the advanced college level classes. And then they were also very clear about the need to see themselves as an entry point into spaces. Angel's parents her mom actually found a Black female doctor for her and her sister, and I remember her talking about just how critical it was to see Black women in academic spaces. Even though she had no desire to go into the medical field, she's in another STEM-based field, but just seeing that was critical. And they all wanted more Black teachers. So when we switched to the impact of math, this was really critical for those that self-identified as bad at math. They fully understand that they use math in their daily lives, and they can articulate where they use it and when they use it. Tanya, yes. And that was so hard for me to realize that I can't provide them that no matter how badly I wanted to. And that I needed to find people for them to talk to that looked like them. And I'll still never fully understand it, but I can empathize with them now, and I understand the importance of it. These three, like I said, fully understand that they use math every day. Thank you. And can articulate how they do it. And there is this incredible disconnect between the math that happens in school and the math that they use every day. The other really interesting thing was that they don't consider their non-math prefix classes to be math. Like stats, they were like, they had a hard time, but it wasn't math. One person had to take retail math for her major. It's essentially like managing a retail store. That was not considered math to her. And so this disconnect is just incredibly huge, to the point where Vanna called it a really cool thought experiment that people do in terms of math in school, and that it was just one more thing they had to do to get through to be where they wanted to be. There was an incredibly negative impact on mental health and feelings about themselves. Frustration that one subject seemed to determine their entire education and career plans, and lifelong fear and anxiety around math did not disappear with graduation for those that had graduated. And I want to read these, but I also get very emotional when I read things like the point where she feels that she has to type 2 + 2 into her calculator because she's so unsure of her abilities anymore. And if you are doing everything you were told to do, from your early middle college advisors, from your parents, from all of the resources from school, and you're still not passing your class, and you're still not understanding, and you still can't get help, like, what else are you supposed to do? And then add on top of the fact that you're doing it independently and as a minority student in classes. And that burden is just humongous. So those that were labeled bad at math or self-identified as bad at math had a significant fear of losing all their other activities because of the intense effort they were putting into math. So if I have to spend extra time or repeat a class again, then I stand to lose anything and everything that I hold dear to myself, because it becomes optional so that I can pass this class. And I have to in order to graduate from high school and to earn the degree that I want. Several of them changed their majors as well. Chandler feels like she settled for her major. She's not unhappy with it, but it wasn't her first choice. And she was not the only one that said that she had changed her plans because she realized the impact that math was having, struggling with math was having on her. Those that self-identified as good at math intentionally chose paths to support STEM majors, like given the option in middle school, taking algebra a year earlier or doing extracurricular activities focused on STEM. They also completed major math requirements for their degrees, like through Calculus 2, Calculus 3, while they were still in ECA. And they found connections between school math and outside of school math, which the other group of girls was not able to do at all. They refused to give up, and this is the persistence part. The amount of physical, emotional, and structural barriers that were put in front of them blows me away, and they powered through them all. Even with emotional stress, and even when they had to retake classes, and even when they had to change their degrees. And they understand, like Tina said, that learning involves some investing to get something out of it. They know that, but they also want to be met where they're at and treated as human beings as they're going through this, and that is 100% understandable to me. And the feeling that it took them longer to figure out how they learn. Chandler talked about that, not figuring it out until after she left ECA for another, she finished her degree at a different college, and then outsourcing help and having to retake classes at the same time. And then reiterating the fact that they were often the only Black female in the 100 level classes and higher at the university. And I have to say that Eastern Michigan is in a diverse area. And the population on campus is not, I mean, it is still a PWI, but it is, you can see when you're walking across campus a variety of skin colors and ethnicities, and you just don't see that in the math classes. Testing was a huge thing, as to be expected, even for the ones that identified as good at math. Anxiety and fear is a significant response to tests, and placement on standardized tests below what they expected. And they were they were incredibly honest and direct in terms of where their strengths and weaknesses were. And so when they, placed below their expectations, it was not the sense of students thinking they should be in Calc 3 and really like needing to be in intermediate algebra or something like that. They're just, some of them are flat out afraid to test in all subjects. And other nerve-wracking experiences, thinking that please don't make me take a test, like Vanna was telling herself over and over to psych herself up that I have to go take this, I have to take this. And Angel just considered it to be mind trickery because some of the tests were not aligned with instruction. And then this whole resentment of being judged off a score and tying that back into the fear of being judged as a typical Black female compounded everything right there. There were a few positive experiences with tests. Angel got reconnected to her love of problem solving when she took the SAT as a middle school student. Vanna felt empowered after one ECA class, and she was just like, I can do this. Let me show you what I know, and I got this. But she said that was very isolated to that one class, and that was from the teacher. And then when they moved into classes that only had a couple tests, there was relief after being in an early middle college that had a test every week. So there's some good and bad going on there. And then we are almost done with themes, because then I want to talk about what we can do. In terms of learning math, as expected, repeating a class had some pretty negative impacts on mental health and anxiety around their progress. And this also comes back to when, like, I'm going to lose everything if I can't pass this class. I'm going to have to like put on my plans on hold because I either can't progress, or I can't graduate from high school, or I can't make my major requirements, or I can't spend time in my extracurriculars because I have to put additional effort back into this. For someone like Angel who loved math, this struggle in this ECA Math 4 is roughly equivalent to Algebra 2. Just destroyed her love of math, and it took her several years after that in college math classes and in activities outside of school in order to pull that back in. And then the isolation of feeling like you're the only person struggling, because in those, Tina was in the developmental level and the general education classes, they didn't do study groups. It was very procedural, and there was not a lot of conversation, and so she felt very disconnected and felt like she was the only one not understanding. Several of them identified like stronger study skills and academic behaviors coming from repeating a class through sheer determination, because Angel was not allowed to progress to a college math class because she was told her note-taking skills were not strong enough, and so she spent the next semester strengthening her note-taking skills. The ability to make connections between content, several of them commented about that being a focus and being able to differentiate between what they understood and what they didn't understand when they had to retake the class. In terms of learning math, they realized like reaching out for help was a huge theme that came through, whether it was from the early middle colleges after school tutoring, the math lab at the college, or from college instructors. The general feeling about the after school program from the early middle college was it was understaffed. And so that was not helpful. Individual office hours with instructors was more helpful than the after school tutoring. The college math lab, though, got significant positive reviews from both groups. It's a place where you could get different solution paths than your instructors. You could get one-on-one help, which was crucial for the girls that self-identified as bad at math. They would write out solutions for you so you could take it with you, and you could meet with your study groups there. And they were not invested in your grade, which is also a piece of that came out. And the perception of the college instructors' willingness to help had a huge impact on their feelings in class. The ones that were willing to create relationships and willing to work one-on-one with the students, the ECA students said that made the entire difference in them passing the class or not. When they were not available, there was the additional stress of getting outside help. And Vanna referred to it as outsourcing. Tina was one who was like, you told me I have to be here and you're willing to meet with me? All right, here I come. I'm coming to see you. I'm going to see you a lot. But then Tina also realized at that point in her life the benefits of social capital. And when she started doing that and the instructor could see her thought process and the fact that she was working on it, she was allowed to retake some tests to show that she understood the material after a period of time. This was particular to ECA Math 4. There was a lot of comments about the fact that even though the class was supposed to be an Algebra 2 class with prerequisites into college level math, it didn't come across that way. And it was just a huge jumbled up thing. And then they didn't show enough content knowledge in anything to move into an equivalent level or the next level in the college. And so that was frustrating for the ones that took that class. The context of the content was also critical. And this came about in both developmental classes, the 0 level, and the college level. When it was just procedural information, the 3 in the developmental classes said that was not helpful at all. Like that was detrimental to their learning, because it reinforced that separation of school math and outside math is not related at all. When they made connections, then they could, when the content was connected, when procedures were connected, when solution methods were connected, and when it was connected to things outside of school, then they could create the structures in their brains in order to remember it and feel confident in it. And both of the 2 quotes on there are from students who were not STEM majors. And this goes back to like the retail math was not considered math by Chandler. And she's quite comfortable with it, but having it in class was not helpful and she didn't understand it at all. Mathematical discourse was more frequent in the high school classes. And so that was a key feature for the university instructors. They all really missed those conversations, the projects, but also being able to talk about things. And as Tina said, hear the dumb stuff and hear the right stuff, and then before she can take it in and internalize it. The multiple pathways were helpful. Sharing common mistakes was helpful. Broad generalizations were not helpful. So they were still struggling with that abstraction part of math as well, because it just hadn't been developed effectively. And then they were expected to abstract on their own, and they just weren't able to do that. So to summarize their experiences underneath my research questions, the high school, early middle college classes had positive and negative attributes, but were not meeting their academic and emotional needs. Their experiences in their college classes, and again, this was like after they would have been through the credentialing for soft skills, the credentialing for academics, was that the transition caused fear, anxiety, and nervousness, even with all of the supports that were put in place with the early middle college. There was a huge recognition of and desire to not be the stereotypical Black female. if they self-identified as bad at math, there was a lot of self-blame and shame on top of everything else. And if they self-identified as good at math, they felt very, very isolated in their math classes. And then those labeled self-identified as bad at math intentionally chose non-STEM majors because they were going to earn degrees. That was not negotiable to them. So they changed their pathways in order to enable themselves to do that. And those self-identified as good at math had really, really wrenching self-doubt that came out of the blue when they hit these barriers that they were not expecting at all. So in order to interpret and create recommendations, I looked at this using critical race theory in math education, specifically some boundaries that Anderson specified. Because critical race theory is not fully developed in math education, Anderson's theory as well, you need some boundaries in order to start looking at it and researching it. And so there are 4. One is the structural nature of racism, which includes excluding Black girls from mathematical spaces and adultifying Black girls. Another one is racial taxes and compensation, which results in low numbers of Black teachers, low numbers of Black women earning doctorates in math, and then the ultimate effect of Black girls not seeing themselves in spaces. The third one is the problems with colorblindness, and that perpetuates colorblindness can perpetuate structural racism and then further perpetuate math as a gatekeeper. And if you're going to interrogate other discursive frames, we need to be very careful about how we conceptualize and frame children and Blackness in studies, because the deficit model is what was routinely used, and that is not acceptable. And then to also challenge that Black girls are not interested in math. And so I didn't spend, I'm going to skip these, a ton of time on critical race theory, but I just wanted to tell you that was how I looked through all of these recommendations. So Anderson also said that in the absence of dramatic changes in the structures of society and the distribution of material resources, it's unlikely that life would improve very much for people of color. And so the recommendations presented are fairly expansive reforms intended to do just that, redistribute resources to create environments in which Black girls obtain equitable outcomes. This is a summary. So Black girls need to be engaged in redefining what math means at the early middle college. They need an intentional student-designed math community. The adults and the structure need to ensure that Black girls have access to varied instructional and assessment opportunities, that the racist history of American math education is named and discussed. They know it's there. They brought it up. Avoiding it is not serving them a purpose at all. And then also address the consequences of being labeled good or bad at math by the education system or by self-identification, and the additional layers from the intersection of being Black and female, not just being female or not just being Black. In terms of the intentional student-designed math community, Nicole Joseph has a Black feminist math pedagogy, which a lot of these recommendations align with really well. And part of that is an integrated social and academic spaces that affords Black girls the freedom and liberation to just be, but also to develop their self-critical thinking and analysis through math around issues that concern them and that they are invested in. And it would be fantastic if this was led by a Black female mathematician. And until that can happen in every school, we still need to come up with ways to provide them with these spaces. In terms of transitioning, specifically in early middle college into a college environment, the Black girls in the program need to be connected, regardless of where they self-identify around math, and regardless of their year in school. Because if you connect cross-age, then you're going to have the older students experiencing something with the younger students watching, and then students being able to come back and share that information. The topics that are discussed, taught, evaluated in these spaces need to be across academics and social concerns. So like really addressing fears of being disconnected from the middle college when they go into the college environment, the reality of transitioning and what it was like, what it's like to interact with the college students and instructors. These were all things that were addressed in the soft skills curriculum over their entire time in the middle college program. But again, it wasn't addressing these students' needs because these were all things that they brought up as concerns for them or impacts on them. Another option is to actually visit the college math classes. Even though we were on the same campus, we could have taken them there. So that might be one way to ease that transition, because a lot of them said that for the instructors willing to work with them, once they met them, they realized that they knew how to talk to them. But it was that initial hurdle of meeting them. Or visiting the math instructors to the Black girl-centered math space. And schedule with a partner. Ideally, another Black girl. At the very least, it needs to be another early middle college student. And intentional pairings would be best. One thing that came through really clearly was that disconnect between math and life. I don't even want to say real life, just math and life. And so one of the features of a Black girl-centered math space is that ability to have those conversations and let them explore all of these things, and to teach skills that may not have traditionally or have not traditionally been offered to people of marginalized identities, such as the reasoning and argumentation and critical thinking and problem solving skills that they may not have gotten if math standards were being used as a racial remediation and as another way to separate students. And then honor and name the racial taxes and the fact that generational taxes exist, and that it's not unique to, this sounds to diminish it, but that it's not individually them, it is a systemic problem. And how can they claim their rightful space in mathematical spaces, and the support to that. And then also making sure everything is centered around their multiple identities. They are not just Black, they are not just female, they are not just daughters, they are not just sisters, like they're not just students. They feel all of their identities as intersection points, and they cannot separate, nor should they have to, but educational research and educational practice tends to try to separate their identities. And then here's some things about math curriculum that, in terms of also easing the burden for reaching out for help, but focusing on them and their identities as mathematicians and people, and then starting to dismantle some of those practices that have been so harmful to them. Even as much as developing early middle college curriculum centered around Black girls and their interests and impact in order to make more connections for them. All right. I am happy to keep talking, or I'm happy to answer questions, but that is all of the information I have at the moment that I was going to share.